Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Nohe. I'm Managing Director for the Central Region in the U.S. For Valenta. And welcome to our Insider Series. Today, we're doing a joint session where we're not only in Dallas, where I am, but we're also coming to you from the land down under. And we're going to be talking about robotic process automation, or RPA. And we're going to be looking at how it is really driving positive change at a school, Redlands School in Australia. I'm happy to be joined by my colleague, John Waterworth from Australia. He's a managing director there, as well as Brad Weatherstone, who's the CFO at Redlands. And to kick things off, I really want to turn it over to John to do a quick introduction of himself, tell you a little bit about Brad, and then I think Brad is going to give you a little bit more details, and then we're going to have a conversation. It's going to take probably about a half hour, and then we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A. So while we're going through the conversation, please feel free to put any of your questions in the Q&A. You'll see a little button at the bottom of your screen, or at least it's at the bottom of my screen. But look around for it on your Zoom interface and just type in some questions, and we'll get to you towards the latter half. So, John, over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks very much. So hello, everyone. My name is John Waterworth. I'm recently the Managing Director for Valenta in Australia. My background prior to Valenta has been in the digital transformation space in various leadership roles for the last 20 years or so, including most recently in the accounting and finance sectors. One of the things that interested me in particular about Valenta was the idea of bringing what was previously a large enterprise value proposition in robotic process automation into the small and medium-sized enterprise space. And yeah, with that in mind, we've got a great guest with us today. So that's Brad Weatherstone. Brad's the CFO at Redlands School, which is one of the most recognizable high schools, but also from kindergarten all the way through to high school. And Brad has taken a very innovative approach in his role there. So I won't go through your full background, Brad, but you've had a pretty varied career from what I understand. So you've held various C-level roles across healthcare, manufacturing. You're now in education. I believe you had a bit of telco background, so really quite a varied approach. Is there anything I've missed there?
No, that covers it. Yeah, probably 6 or 7 different industries, predominantly in manufacturing for the last 20 years, in SMEs predominantly. So again, a few multinationals, but organisations from 20 staff up to 1,000 staff, turning over between 10 million up to 200 million. So not the big end of town. And then about 5 years ago, an opportunity presented itself at Redlands, which is a private school in Australia. There's about 1,000 of the non-public schools in Australia. And so Redlands is 138 years old next year, so established in 1884. It's a long-standing school, about 1,700 students from preschool. So we take in 3-year-olds through to year 12. So quite a large school, one of the largest schools. And we have around about 300 permanent and full-time staff on our payroll. And additionally, around about 100 to 150 casual staff from our sports coaches and our drama, music and dance tutors. So quite a big organisation. In saying that, the finance team is quite small. It's a team of about 6 people. But yeah, it's been a really interesting and rewarding journey the last 4.5 years at Redlands.
Fantastic. And what about, I guess, having that background in such a number of different industries, what have you noticed as some of the key differences and indeed similarities between your current environment and those that you've come from?
Yeah, I guess, although we're a high fee paying school, you know, as an SME and predominantly in the finance area, and I've got a broad role. I look after finance, HR, risk, governance, compliance, responsible for our canteen and uniform shop. So it's a varied role, but, you know, again, starting in the finance area that we looked at in all of my roles previously, you know, it was always looking at how could we do things better, smarter, more efficiently, you know, asking the question of why are we doing it a certain way? And I guess it's only been the last few years, I think that the solutions we're talking about, RPA especially, you know, have become, I guess, achievable for SMEs and organisations, you know, of which I'd say Redlands in the finance area especially, you know, it makes sense to be looking at investing in those kinds of technologies.
So I have a question for you, Brad. You know, our RPA is really about taking rules-based, repeatable processes at scale and automating them. But how would you define RPA in a broader context? I'd like to get your definition as well, John.
Yeah, look, I guess when I first approached the finance team, you know, I sort of use the analogy of Excel, and back in the day there were some very smart people who used macros to automate some of the steps and processes, and you know, it's really now it's like Excel macros on steroids. So really anywhere where as a manual repetitive process, you know, as you say, a rules-based software robot, not a physical robot, a robot can replicate that, and that's very powerful. You know, and I guess when I first joined Redlands, you know, we get through month end, and then they'd turn around and they'd start putting transactions in. I kept thinking, you know, how many months ends are there? And it's doing the same thing over and over again. And I think that's where RPA is so valuable, to free up that the transactional and then allow you to do more value adding activities, investigations, problem solving, partnering with the business, whatever that is. I mean, you know, that's, I think, the benefit of and the definition I would use for RPA.
Yeah, how about you, John?
Yeah, I guess it probably depends a little bit who I'm talking to at the time, Richard, but a lot of the organisations that we're speaking to in that SME space, they may have heard of robotic process automation, they may not. They've certainly heard of terms like digital transformation and AI, and sometimes all of these terms can get a little bit confusing. So the way that I sort of break it down is, it's as Brad said, essentially it's a piece of software at the end of the day, but it's custom built to mimic the way a human in a particular organization interacts with their computer. It accesses applications with logins and passwords the same way that a human does. And really it helps stitch together a business process from end to end across multiple applications if required. So it's sometimes important to define what it can't do as well as what it can do. So it's really has to be rules based. You have to be able to set a set of rules as to how the robot is to interact on a given circumstance. So where it's a matter of judgment or something or data that is outside of the accessibility of the robot, then it needs to hand off to a human to make that decision. But essentially it becomes the glue that stitches those applications together, freeing up the human to be able to do more value-added type work.
Yeah, I agree with both of those, and I think another acronym, BPO, or Business Process Automation, is really about labor arbitrage and moving you know, the tasks to the right location, but still having a human in the loop. And the more that we see RPA capabilities enhancing, the more we're able to free up those resources as well, so that they can work on things that really need a human involved rather than can be accomplished by software on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the reasons that I thought Brad would be a fantastic guest here is that I think he's probably a little bit unique in that many of the organizations that we speak to as Valenta, they're in the very early stages of understanding robotic process automation and where it can potentially be applied. But Brad, I guess perhaps because of that background in the manufacturing space previously, you've actually been looking into robotic process automation as a capability for a number of years. So it would be interesting to hear a little bit about your robotic process automation journey and how you've gone from the start of it to the point now where I think you've already identified between 30 and 40 different processes at Redlands School that robotic process automation has the capability to simplify.
Yeah, no.
Where did it all start, I guess?
Yeah, I think again, I think it all started from that question of why, there are smarter ways of doing things. Doing the same thing over and over again. And I kept thinking, within finance, obviously been in finance for 30 years, and so sort of started in those transactional areas in any SME that are going to have accounts payable, accounts receivable, assistant accounting type transactions. I mean, most of those roles are predominantly transactional. I use the example of, accounts payable, that's going to be, 90-95% transactional, whereas as you move up, through the organization, you hopefully you're doing less and less transactional, so sort of started in that area of traditional finance, an area that I had responsibility for and didn't have to do a whole lot of change management outside of the organization. And I guess before I just embark on that, I mean, the big benefit I see across the organization, I mentioned we have 300 staff, so we've got 180 teachers, okay, supporting our 1,700 students. And again, we've evolved and we've got various systems and processes, from learning management systems, all different systems where teachers are needing to input information. So ultimately, as we progress through finance in the areas of my responsibility, the real benefit will be in freeing up time, for teachers. If I can save, 15 minutes, half an hour a week, you can multiply that by 180 in our organization. It starts to become really powerful. So I think it's questioning why, and then obviously finding the right solution and technology, and been sort of looking for that for the last 3 or 4 years. And then most recently, probably the end of last year, RPA became more cost effective, joined up with Valenta early this year. And we've already got 12 processes that have already been automated, predominantly within the assistant accounting, AP and AR. So again, in the accounts receivable area, our accounts receivable team, it's only 1.5 people, but they essentially do 3 tasks. They do the billing, they do the receipting, and then we chase up money. Now, at the moment, the billing and the receipting are predominantly all have been transactional. And we've started identifying processes that can be automated, and ultimately most of those processes will be able to be automated. But the ringing, the chasing up people at this stage, although we've got some smarter technologies out there, that's always going to be sitting with our finance team. And it's important we have that customer facing understanding with our parents or our customers. And then we moved into areas around payroll. Some of the processes around payroll, we're now looking at fixed assets. And not only that, as I mentioned, some of the other areas of responsibility. So for example, our canteen. So again, probably not so relevant in some of the previous manufacturing organizations, but we have 2 canteens on staff to support our 1,700 students and our 300 staff. And every day we take all our orders via a system, an online ordering system. And there's an 8:30 cutoff. And then the canteen really needs to pull all those orders together, get all the information out so they can determine what they need to make as far as meals on a daily basis. And that used to take them 2 people about an hour to correlate all the information. And that was an hour, and they had to have recess ready by 10:30 and lunch ready by 12:30. So mapping out all the processes, what everybody did in and around that, we now run the robot at 8:30, and at 8:33 that process is completed. And it's gone live about a month or so ago, and our students have just started to come back onto campus because of COVID. So the whole term 3, we didn't have anybody, and that's fantastic. So we've freed up basically an hour where there's more time for preparation, there's more focus on the quality of the food. So wouldn't think it's a traditional RPA opportunity, but it's anywhere where you've got repetitive processes. And the other benefits are, that it removes human error. I think, as Richard mentioned, it's rules-based. So our robot, Maze, isn't having a bad day, isn't, looking at different stuff. So, and I think it's important from an auditing perspective that there is auditability, that the process is replicable 100% of the time. The data will change, but I think, very powerful. And then, these are small processes that an individual can start with and you can map out. But that freeing up that hour on a daily basis has been invaluable to the canteen, for example, in our school.
Yeah, and you mentioned the freeing up an hour, and I think one of the things that's really compelling about RPA is when you look at the numbers, the bot can do 5 to 20 times more transactions, per minute or per whatever you want to use compared to human. It also doesn't have the human errors. If it's not going to misplace a decimal point, for example. And then you can run it 24/7. So, there are 3 8-hour blocks in 24 hours. So when you multiply 5 times faster with 3 times as many hours per day, you can get 15 times more work out of a bot than you do a human. And it's very compelling. One of the things that I would be interesting in hearing, because I haven't heard the story before, but how did you run across Valenta, and how would you compare it to a do-it-yourself type model?
Well, actually, I guess 2 years ago, we were lucky enough to be in a position that we brought on a business analyst and started researching technologies out there. And the plan was, at that stage, to build the capability internally. Wasn't really sure on what was required, and we sort of started in the accounts payable area. We went out, looked at technologies, looked at the underlying technology like the UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, and we were going to go direct and build up our capability. And it took a lot longer than I imagined, because the person in the role had to learn as they went along. And part of the process, we went out to market, got it introduced to Valenta, and then developed an understanding about the business model, about the onshore model and the offshore model, and again leveraging UiPath, which I think is the platform that underpins the technology, which is world leading. And then it sort of dawned on me that it just made perfect sense to partner with somebody who does this as a business. And what that's meant is that we've been able to, accelerate the opportunities, the tasks and the processes, because they're not end to end. And, so that's sort of been the journey, some exploration ourselves, and then really understanding that what Valenta bring as a partner, the expertise, consulting if you need it, the technical experience, and then the post-implementation has been, a great 9 months that we've been, in partnership together.
Yeah, and there's an adage that I've heard a few people use in respect to RPA when you're taking on or looking at RPA as a start-off within your organization, about thinking big, but starting small. And you've probably actually started quicker than the majority, Brad, in that you've already identified 30 or 40 processes and already live with 15 or so in a relatively short space of time. But I think that's where the Valenta model can help in providing RPA as a managed service, but also providing the skill sets and resource to help you scale to a full internal center of excellence as required. I guess what I'd also be interested in finding out, and I think that might be useful for some of the people that are listening in, Brad, is you've identified use cases for RPA pretty much across the organization. So how have you gone about identifying those processes that you think are optimal? When you look
at businesses and schools are no different. I mean, when you actually drill into it and look at what people do and the amount of time that they're touching their keyboard and they're entering data in, I mean, it just becomes, and once you're aware, it just becomes self-evident that everywhere you look, and you look at people's titles, you know, administration assistant and officer, and you know, and those roles, you know, some of those roles will change. So yeah, started in finance, and you know, then looked at canteen, you know, those areas that I was responsible for, and then just again and getting out into the business and understanding where the pain points are. So you know, we do an annual staff survey, health check, and what became evident in the teaching profession, probably different somewhere, is, you know, the first 5 years in teaching, 50% of teachers leave the profession. And the main reason that's quoted is workload. So workload, you know, often equates to admin. So, and this is the case at Redlands, and we haven't even really begun that journey in the teaching and learning area at this stage. But I think if everyone just, you know, thinks about what they do on a daily basis and how much doing they're doing, and rather than sitting and analysing, and that's what happened in my finance team. I mean, that they have been 95% doing and 5% analysing, and that's just not where you know, my accountant and my finance manager really, you know, should be at. We need to be creating insights. We need to be understanding the business. So I think it's questioning, it's understanding. But I think if you just spend a bit of time with people and look at, you know, how much we still all rely on Excel, and often that data needs to be input or transferred, then the light goes off. There's an opportunity. But I also think, as you said, start small. You start with a simple process. So we started with the assistant accountant role. Assistant accountant role, by definition, is going to be 95% transactional. We asked for all of the list of tasks that are done on a monthly basis, and you know, there were 30 tasks. You know, 3 of them were tasks that took 1 or 2 days each. So they became the low-hanging fruit. Yep. To look at and say, well, if this assistant accountant's spending 2 days on this task every month, and has been doing that role for, you know, a long time and going forward, that's where we should start. So then it really comes down to, I think, in any SME, documentation. Do we have it? Do we know exactly what the steps are? And the more the process is documented, the easier it is to work with Valenta and then for the solution to be mapped down. If you don't have it, it can be created. I think, as you said, John, it's really just taking a step-by-step snipping tool or a screen capture of what you're actually doing. And, you know, and it does take time. You have to find the time to invest in this while you're still doing your day job. So that's not necessarily always easy, but if you keep an eye on the end goal and understand that, you know, 2 or 3 months' time, those 1 or 2 days, you know, are now going to be predominantly, completely, if not fully eliminated, mostly eliminated, then it can become pretty powerful. And then you work your way down the tasks, and then you look at rolling that out across, you know, other roles, and then you get the benefit of a teaching role, as I said, where you haven't just got one person, but you've got it multiplied by however many of those, you know, types of roles are in your organization.
Just to remind people, we have a few minutes left here to go through till we get to the Q&A, but if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A. I see a couple in there, but feel free to add more. Brad, you alluded to COVID when you spoke about people coming back to campus. And we all recognize that one thing the pandemic has done is it's increased or leapfrogged the society's acceptance of technology. You know, the fact that we're doing this on a Zoom webinar, nobody knew what Zoom was pre-pandemic, and it's really increased that quite a bit. What are some of the other broad macroeconomic or societal changes that have impacted your adoption of RPA, or what sort of impact has that had?
Yeah, look, I think as you said, COVID needed to ensure that we could do our job remotely, and obviously, those processes that were automated didn't make a difference where it was. We all had some challenges, pivoting to online learning, to the team needing to work from home in processes where there's still a lot of documentation and paper, and that's somewhat problematic. So definitely, as we know, COVID has brought forward and transformed that digital transformation, and we can see that. We can definitely see the benefits, and for those processes that had already been automated, others that became problematic, needing to do those remotely were other areas that probably surfaced that wasn't aware of. And I think just, generally themes, very few organizations now are not being asked to do more with less. So I think, that efficiency and being able to, as I say, automate the non-value adding, it needs to happen, but software robots are better positioned to do that than humans are. So I think it's and the other key area I think for the school is really getting the finance team out into the business and understanding what's happening. And you need, without bringing on new resources, the only way again of doing that is to look at smarter ways of and more efficient and productive ways of doing what we're doing now, and allowing then opportunities for more value adding business partnering to happen with any organization.
Yeah, another theme actually that I thought was interesting in our earlier discussion, Brad, was a lot of people look at RPA as a technology tool, and whilst at the end of the day it is a piece of software, to me the way I look at it is it almost sits as a layer that is adjacent to or supporting your existing technology stack. A lot of the processes that I know that we've done at your school, they either begin with data that's taken out of your educational ERP system, or they're processes that end up with the data going in to those systems. So really I see that RPA playing almost as a supporting model for some of that existing investment in your technology stack, so you can ensure that you're maximizing the benefit of those investments by ensuring that you have the right data in there at the right time, to get the most out of them. How do you feel about that as an approach?
Yeah, look, I'm sure we're not the only organization. There are a myriad of systems out there that organizations have, from ERPs and CRMs and other systems, and they don't always talk to each other, and if they do, not fully. And we've had that issue, and we still have that issue at the school. So I mean, as you say, I think RPA is a great an enabler of those systems. If there are limitations in your systems being able to seamlessly talk to each other, and you do have to have system A talking to system B, then surely you want the most efficient and productive process for that to happen, to get the best out of both of those systems. And that's a system or a process where data needs to go out of A and into B, then you'd want to be able to do that as efficiently and productively as possible. So, absolutely, John. I think we've got those requirements and those limitations in some of our inherent systems, and I'm sure a lot of organisations, have those constraints as well. And RPA is definitely a solution to enable your inherent systems to be better communicating with each other.
Yeah, I see we have we have a number of questions, which is great. I'll ask one more, and then we'll Amanda, maybe we'll bring you back in to go through what questions have come through. What lessons have you learned, and that you could share?
I think, as I said, I mean, really, it's about starting small, thinking big but starting small. So again, look at that. If you're in finance, or in any discipline, look at that process that's most painful and time consuming for you or your team. That's manual and repetitive. And start there. I mean, that's and you build up an understanding, with Valenta, with who you're using, and you can leverage leverage that, but you need to start. The technology is there. It's cost effective, whether you're in a team of 2 or a team of 20. And then once you're asking and you're inquisitive, it becomes easier as you gain a little bit of momentum and understanding and see that process happen. That first one automatically happens. It's wow. This is really going to be, and really not having to worry about it. As long as the process, your requirements don't change, it's locked and loaded away, and then you continue to build on that. And I think, there's, as I say, there's opportunities in every organisation I've worked in, and in every department that I can see within our school. Some are bigger opportunities than others, but I'd be surprised if anyone on the call or knows anyone who doesn't do any administration and transactional work in their roles or in their teams or in their organisations.
Yeah, if it can be automated, it will be, right? And I think if you're listening to this and you're just kind of thinking, I wouldn't even know where to start, there's also process mining tools that you can use that can delve into the systems and look at what the end-to-end processes are and begin to identify where you're going to get the highest return on the investment. Amanda, can you tell us whether or not, or go through some of the questions we have online?
Yes, of course. So the first one, I'll give Brad a little bit of a speaking break, but first one is from Richard, and I believe the gist of the question is, for a small to medium-sized business or for a smaller business, what kind of process does Valenta offer in terms of RPA and the developers and consulting that Brad spoke about in his case?
Yeah, so well, we can come in. I mentioned the process mining software tool. We can implement that. We have the ability to look at end-to-end processes within any department, and every process is simply made up of a series of tasks. And what the consulting engagement does is it gives you a roadmap to say, well, for this task, you really need a bot. For this task, you probably need a human in the loop, but it could be offshore. And for this task, you really need someone who is onshore. But that's something that certainly Valenta can help with, and would be happy to help out in any way we can.
Great, thanks so much, Richard. The next question will be for Brad. How much time did you spend on researching, and how much of the development of RPA? So you kind of spoke about that at the beginning of the webinar, where you were looking into, you hired a business analyst, and we're looking at other options, to help automate some of the really tedious processes that you had. So how much time did you spend researching, I guess, is the gist of the question.
Probably 9 to 12 months. And although it was beneficial to understand, what was out there, it wasn't an inexpensive exercise. And I would say that, in hindsight, if I'd have found Valenta earlier, probably wouldn't needed to have went through that journey as far as understanding what was out there, whether or not we could do it internally or not. So I think, if you're small, as Richard said, it doesn't really matter. Valenta have end-to-end solutions there. So look, it was an expensive exercise, and not every organization can go through, but ultimately, we ended up partnering with Valenta, and we're never going to be looking to build internally the skills and capabilities that someone like Valenta has, both onshore and offshore.
Great, thank you, Brad. Sorry,
Amanda, I might just jump in there and sort of add a little bit to Brad's response there to give, I guess, another starting point. So I've been talking to a number of smaller firms, a number of accounting firms as well in Australia recently. And in those organizations, they have a pretty strong idea where the issues lie in their organization in terms of that repetitive manual, monotonous work. So finding the task hasn't been a challenge. And for them, really, it was about how to get started. So part of our approach to enable organizations to really put their toe in the water of robotic process automation is we'll engage with our offshore consultants. We'll define and document the process in question. We can then build a proof of concept to show the robot doing the rudimentary task with live data in the client's environment. And really, that's something that we provide at our risk. And once the client has signed off from that initial proof of concept build, the charging then commences only when we put it live in their environment. And for a single robot, we're talking about less than the cost of a typical offshore resource. So I think, Brad, it's, in Brad's case, as I said, he's already up to between 10 and 15 processes, but that's all operating off a single robot at the moment. So I think for some organizations, it can be as simple as defining a process that they want to look at. We can look to build a proof of concept, and from there, really your robot journey can commence. So I know, Brad, you've given your robot a name, and so you have staff that receive notification that the job's been done by the robot, and soon that the ideas start spreading as people get an understanding of what the robot's capabilities are. So that's another way to approach it.
Great.
And I just say, look, I think the engagement strategy there that John outlined would have been far more efficient if I'd reached out initially. Probably would have saved ourselves 9 or 12 months and quite a lot of cost. And look at that proof of concept and engagement. And you're right. So Maze is our robot. So again, I look at Maze as our IDW, our intelligent digital worker, and it's one of the team. And an important part of the team, and will be moving forward. So I think, I would say now that kind of engagement strategy that John has outlined is far more efficient and productive than the process that I went through initially, probably unaware. So it would have been good if I was on this webinar a couple of years ago.
That's great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Brad. Next question will be a combination again. It says, hi, Brad, you mentioned one of the canteen processes used to take an hour, but now the bot, or MACE, as you mentioned the name, completes in approximately 3 minutes. Could you share examples where the bot completes tasks significantly faster than a human, and how long the bot would take in those cases, I guess? If you have any examples, if not, John or Richard can jump in.
Yeah, so I mean, in that example, I think as Richard outlined before, so the canteen example, took an hour to people. It's now 3 minutes. Accounting wise, we've got processes in accounts payable where invoices that are basically manually keyed in, are taking 5 minutes, are now taking like 15 seconds. So I mean, the saving in time is considerable once Maze it goes live with a particular process. Another example would be receipting. So we now have when all of our customers pay, and we have all the payments hitting the bank statements. Each of those payments was individually allocated and keyed into the system. So now we have a simple process where the bank statement's downloaded, reference details of account numbers are basically captured, put in a CSV file, and then there's a process whereby Maze, loads that into our ERP system and automatically allocates a payment. Again, at one of our accounts receivable team, we're spending, between an hour and an hour and a half, depending upon the number of transactions every morning, from 6:30 to 8 a.m. And that process is run again in around about 3 minutes. So, it takes a while to get there, but I mean, so the savings are in time are significant in the 12 processes that we already have live, and as I say, the other 10 to 20 that are in the processes of being documented and developed.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, because RPA is industry agnostic, we tend to look at it across different departments, right? So every company is going to have finance, HR, operations, IT, and it's really a question of looking at the processes within those departments, regardless of what industry you're in or what size of your organization is, and defining those processes and then looking at automating them.
Thank you. Another question. Other than tasks getting done faster, what are other benefits did you see? In other words, with people being freed up, what benefits did you see from their free time? I guess, Brad, and then can go over to others.
Yeah, so I think, as we said before, I mean, the task, the time is obviously a critical component. We also mentioned around the auditability of the processes, the reliance, the consistency. You know, once that task has been mapped out, you know, rules-based, it doesn't change. The data changes, but the maze, our software robot, you know, isn't going to miss a step. You know, so auditability is important, reliability, and then I guess, you know, freeing up the time is really going to be a decision for you know, each and every business. In our example at the moment, you know, that's spending more time on reconciliations, that's spending more time on problem solving, on deep dives in a particular area that we really didn't have time to when you're predominantly transactional during the month. Once month end happens, you know, then the processes start again. So business cases, you know, problem solving, having the time, you know, on a day or in a week to know that you've got time to spend on, you know, those value adding activities, whatever they are, for your business.
Yeah, we have about 3 minutes left, and I think just to begin to wrap something up, there's another question I see here that around how did you handle resistance from the existing people when you were trying to implement it?
Yeah, look, that's a difficult one. You know, accounts payable, accounts receivable, you know, those roles will change dramatically, as in there will be changes to the structure of the finance team. You know, and that's unfortunate, but that's going to be happening and that's already happening in a lot of industries, a lot of organizations. So there's a trade-off there. The other trade-off is, you know, my accountants and finance managers and other higher paid staff are now actually getting to do more rewarding and challenging work, and the kind of work that they've been studying and working hard for. So look, there is resistance, and for those roles that were going to be impacted, it's about open, you know, communication and working through the process. You know, and that's what we did early on. That's what I did early on in those roles that were predominantly 95% transactional, and I knew were going to be impacted. And then taking the journey with the team. So early communication, be open and transparent, and you know, work with the team.
Yeah, excellent.
Sorry,
John,
Richard,
go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just going to add a little bit to Brad's response there in that topic of, you know, impact to local resources. So I came across a study a short time ago by Virginia University, and it was focused on the big four in the accounting industry. So the Deloittes, the KPMGs, the Ernst & Youngs, who were, to be honest, one of the early adopters within the RPA space. And so this study was quite an extensive study, and they looked at some of the key outcomes from their experience with RPA. And there was a couple that touched on that. So one of their findings was that the deployment of robotic process automation hadn't had a significant impact at all on local headcount. So same number of employees, they might have been doing slightly different tasks, but it had resulted in a decrease in use of offshore resources, presumably because it's focused on tasks that were traditionally offshore because they're repetitive and so on. Also, they've got data about an improvement on employee satisfaction correlating to the RPA deployment. And again, you'd think logically that's due to people are spending their time now on higher value tasks rather than gathering all the data in order to create that value in the first place. So yeah, some interesting perspectives from organizations there on that topic from organizations that have used RPA for quite some time.
Excellent. Well, we're right at time, I believe. So I'd like to thank both of you for participating in this. And Brad, really interesting story. It's wonderful having you as one of our key customers, and we look forward to providing whatever support we can. And thank you very much for doing this. John, do you have any closing thoughts before we end it?
Really, just to echo, thanks to Brad. It's really good of you to take the time out, and I think the insights you've been provided will be really useful to the audience that we've got here today, which is a real mixture of SMEs that are looking to take that first step into the RPA world. So thanks very much.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. We'll close it out now.
All right. Thank you.